Hey, and welcome to Need It Make It. I'm Mike. So the small Creality K1 printer is probably one of my favorite printers so far. It's simple, it's fast, and it's pretty accurate as well. I also enjoy using it a lot more after routing it and just being able to customize it more myself. But there is one thing that's been bugging me for quite a while with this printer, and that is this cable chain setup. It's noisy, it gets jammed up and pops the top off sometimes. It also can pop the cable chain apart as well. So in this video, we're going to fix it. I'm going to show you how to do it for the cost of less than 10 grams of filament and a few random parts you probably have hanging around the shop. So stick around. When the K1 is probing for mesh in the back corner or you print large parts, we get the cable chain that's getting pinched. And unfortunately, whether we're printing topless or we have a top on as well, my cable chain will break apart at the back when this happens. It will also bend and contort the chain. It also makes a ton of noise, and every so often it lifts the top off and likes to move it around, which is kind of funny, but it's not something that should happen. So I have been thinking about this for quite a while now, and I think the best solution is just to raise the cable chain up. This will allow the back of the extruder and the motor shroud to clear the bottom of that chain, and it should give it the space that it needs. To get this going with a simple fix, first we're going to raise up the back of the cable chain. Now you can do this just simply by drilling 2 more holes and tapping them with an M3 tap. Or if you don't have the tools to do that, I've also created this riser. These are M3 and they are 10 millimeter long. Fortunately, I can't reuse the originals because the originals are just a little bit too short. And I've also set it at a very slight angle, and that's going to help a bit with the sagging of the cable chain. So now for the front of the cable chain where it connects to the head, I've started with this steampunk version, which is just a 3mm by 25mm metric screw. It uses a 3mm washer and a piece of PTFE tubing. And then we can take an extruder here, and that just acts as a spacer. And this was my test setup. It is not the nicest looking. So for the final version, I took a 3D scan using Polycam, which is now a far more capable program because it can use the macro lens in your phone. And with this, I was able to create something that looks good, and it's going to be as strong as a camel's back. So the first part I have here is the head mount spacer, and it's got a pretty funny shape, but it does fit really nicely around the original. And I've cut this PTFE tubing to 19 millimeters or 3/4 of an inch. It has a 4mm hole in the center. And then we have this PTFE tubing, which is the thin-walled PTFE tubing, and it fits perfectly into there. And that fits right over top of the original boss and nestles in there really nicely. Okay, the cable chain end mount fits right over top of that, simple. And then all we need now is a M3 by 25mm long machine screw. And I've added a washer here because the head on this one's a bit too small. Now, if you don't have anything 25mm like I didn't, I just cut this one to length. And this should just move freely like that, not too much play like the original. So I was not happy with how this turned out at the back here. It's sticking out too far, and if I run this right to the back, it can collide. I don't really want any possibility of that colliding, so I've gone ahead and created a new version that replaces this one, so let's go ahead and get that one installed. All right, so not only does this one look better and it finishes off against the bottom of the bracket a little bit nicer, but we can take this and run it all the way along. No possibility of collisions. Perfect. This one also has that angle on here, and actually I increased the angle just a little bit to bring this up just slightly more, so it's about a 2-degree angle. So let's go ahead and get some testing done. So first I want to just print topless just to make sure that there is no issue. I don't think there's going to be. I think it's going to be really smooth and quiet. And then we'll print with the top on after that. Okay, so we're going to get our first test done. Now I am going to print just towards this side. I'm going to be using a pretty fast print with filling up as much of the depth as I can. It's going to have some infill in there as well. Okay, I've got another test going. This time it's actually faster. I've thinned the layer heights a little bit, and I've added some glue stick because the first layer did not stick well on the last print. And I'm also changing it to cubic because cubic's going to be a little bit more variety. I have upped the temperature as well. I had a little bit too low temperature for that speed. So this is working great. The height is just perfect. I see that it's not rubbing at all on the top of the frame. So if you print topless, it looks like it's going to give you the clearance that you need. No noise whatsoever from the cable chain. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put the top on, and then we'll see what it looks like. Now, one thing about the top that I noticed, mine only has 2 magnets in it. So this one corner has a magnet in it. This corner has no magnet in it, magnet, and no magnet. So these other corners should have magnets in them. No wonder the top's been popping off all the time. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. It doesn't seem to be lifting like it was before. It's definitely not making the large crashing noises that it was before either. There's no major pinching, and it doesn't seem to be coming off at the back. I will run some more tests before I completely release this, and I might make some other little tweaks and adjustments, but for the most part, it's pretty good. Really, this should have been much higher. Actually, the frame should have been higher, just like it is on the K1 Max. I don't exactly know why they did that. Maybe it was the size of the box or just an oversight. So I have this print going at normal speed. This is a 0.2 millimeter layer height. So the noise level is dramatically reduced. I don't have nearly as much clanging against the side there, but I also had a little piece of kind of rubberized material that had a sticky side to it, and I stuck it to the inside of the top of the lid where it was rubbing up against. Wow guys, did I ever screw up big time. So that piece of tape that I had put on there, I wasn't really happy with the adhesive and how it looked, so I tried to get it off, and that adhesive did not come off at all. So I used some acetone, and that made it even worse. So what I've got here is a piece of high temperature silicone, and I've got some 3M double-sided mounting tape, the stuff you'd use for outdoors for your car. And I'm going to add that onto the inside there, and that should deaden any sound when it's being hit with the cable chain. Okay, at least it seems to work pretty well. I wish that the silicone was a little bit thinner. It really only needs to be maybe 1 millimeter thick. It could even be something like silicone weather stripping. That would work perfectly. So I'm going to do another test with the Bowden tube on the outside, or reverse Bowden tube on the outside. Something about having it inside there wasn't sitting right with me. When I was watching this move, every little movement of the cable chain was affecting this at the connector. And I think it's going to lead to premature wear. When I took it out, there were huge gouges in it, so I had to cut the end of it. So I've just used some zip ties. I'm just going to zip tie the end of it here to keep it down. And I'll run another test and make sure that that's going to work properly. But I think this is actually a better solution, although it might not look quite as nice. The K1 Max, the frame is a little bit taller, there's more room inside there for the cable chain, it kind of sinks right in. This is so short and condensed. So they've kind of made up the difference with this top cap, which works okay, but you do get some rubbing and scuffing on the inside here, and it kind of makes this all messed up. I'd like to see maybe a solution with a glass top instead. Okay, I'm just watching this now, and I think I prefer reverse Bowden tube on the top. I'm just looking at the motion, I'm looking at how it comes into the extruder here, and it's definitely not being restricted as much as it was before, and it's not nearly as much movement back and forth. Yeah, this looks really good, and it's pretty quiet. When it gets to the midpoint of the bed, it starts to make this kind of rattling noise, but that is whether the top is on or off. So it's obviously not related to the cable chain whatsoever. And it might just be related to some sort of a movement underneath the bed because that's where it's least supported. I'm not quite sure. It's not really a lot of noise, but it seems to be just at that point right there, mid-span. So for the final test, I want to do a quick time lapse. So we'll do that in the back corner, and that should be pretty much the worst case scenario, but it's going to be quite tall, and we'll be able to get a good idea of whether this is going to work over a longer period of time. I wanted something that did the job, but it also needed to blend in so that it wasn't that obvious that we made any changes at all, and I think this did a pretty good job with that. It is important to have the thin-walled tube cut to 19 millimeters because the top of that tube is going to compress slightly and it will prevent that screw from backing out. But you can also carefully apply Loctite to the threads, and that should do the same job. My K1 Max as stock had thread lock applied to that screw, but my K1 did not have it. And if you want to download your own set, they are available for free to download. I have linked these parts, which I am calling the Cable Camel. On Maker World and on printables. Just make sure that you print them from high temperature materials like ABS so that they last and they can remain stiff under all conditions. And the parts that I made here were printed with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, 5 walls, 4 tops, 4 bottoms, and 0.16 millimeter layer height. I'm also working on another project for this printer to bring even more user-friendliness and functionality to it, which is going to work in conjunction with raising up that cable chain. So make sure that you subscribe and hit that notification bell as well, so you always know when a new video is released. Also, making a comment, no matter how short, really helps with that YouTube algorithm and it keeps me making content like this. I believe if you own a K1C, they've already raised up that cable chain to something like the solution that we've used here, so it shouldn't be necessary on that version of the printer. I hope you found this video helpful, and thank you as always to each of my patrons for helping to support this channel and making videos like this possible. And if you want to help support this channel as well, I've left the link in the description below, and consider joining us on our very own Discord server where we discuss everything 3D printing related. Take care everybody, we will see you on the next one.